This is the Bonus Section Podcast, episode number 26. What's most important to you? Are you the type of person that knows you were meant for something greater in this lifetime and that somewhere inside of you there's just this bigger version of yourself just trying to break through? But in spite of all your self-development, you just can't seem to find the way up? Well, then, hey, you're definitely in the right place. I'm Danny Griffin, the founder of the Bonus Section and the host of this podcast, and a person just like you trying to learn how to live the most fulfilling life possible. Now, to help you take immediate action to get moving in a better direction, if you want to take advantage of it, we have some notes that we take from each episode, and for a short time, we post them over at freethinkingtools.com. The notes from the episodes for a couple episodes deep, because we don't want a long list of confusion. We'll give you a couple things to think about each week. freethinkingtools.com. The notes from each episode are there. All right, in this episode, I want to go right after something. What's most important to you? Now, this is a recurring theme in my life as a coach, as a father, and something that I dealt with long ago, that it's almost like it's the permission-giving episode to do you. So let's talk about this, okay? The first question or statement that I want to make is, what's so wrong about a selfish starting point? See, the word selfish has this negative connotation that all we want to do is say, oh, you're so selfish. Well, okay, very basically, as a human, we're trying to survive. So if we don't have some sense of selfishness, then we might not survive, right? So you have to take care of yourself first. I say it's the putting the oxygen mask on your own face first before helping others on the plane, right? That's the sense of taking care of yourself first. So of course it's human to think selfishly. We're not trying to breathe this out, all this political correctness and we're supposed to be this way or that. Stop. Let's just do us as humans first. Let's be selfish as a starting point. Before we can do all these other great things, we better take care of ourselves. So I think it's that permission that selfishness is okay that we start at. But the next point here, we go a little bit deeper. And I've told this story before on the podcast already because it works and it's important and I can see it in the lives of my own children. When they would, and somebody just asked me this the other day, and that's why I brought it back up. Somebody was curious, somebody that I coach in a real estate context was curious about what did I do with my children, because he has children that are younger than mine. He said, well, what did you do? I said, look, and how young did you do it? So a lot of people think, well, there are certain stages you say this. And no, I believe that as soon as my children could understand what I was saying in my native tongue, then I was going to speak to them like, quote unquote, an adult. I was going to provoke them to think for themselves early and often. God forbid you don't know what could happen to you. So you want to give them the wisdom and the challenges that you faced so that they have these tools and these resources they can use and figure out their own life. Because you can't always be there for them as much as you want to control that situation. You just can't. So I can remember Stephanie walking. I would drop her off literally at probably first grade and maybe even the year right before that. I remember dropping her off at this little private school and she would walk through this window and I would just tease her and I would drive along there and she would put the X in the window, leave me alone and all this, and we would have a laugh. But before she got out of the car, all the time and constantly, I'm not going to say every day because then I would have been just a gnat, but I would always ask her, if you could do one thing for the rest of your life, what would it be? And it was just this permission, because I remembered as a young guy trying to do so many things. I remember being called the Renaissance man by one of my counselors in high school, and at the time it sounded so great. This rebirth, this guy who was cultured but yet business, could be all these different things. Yeah, but you become thin soup in all of them. And I think even back then when I looked at who I was and who I am today, I just loved to coach people. I really did. I loved directing, coaching, helping in that context. And it was natural to me. Even when I was in the finance business, I was in personal relationships with people I worked with, directing them, coaching them, helping them, guiding them. And so it was there. But I didn't know that at the time. I mean, I had gotten some sort of an inclination of it from my mother, who was really good at that sort of sitting down, and she was like the family shrink, and she could talk to you, and she would give you these things called truth pills, right? And she would lead you to the truth, or want you to see the pursuit of the truth so that you could make your own decisions. And it was just a fascinating process when you look back, and it was just so valuable. So I manifested it in saying to people, if you could do one thing the rest of your life, what would it be? And it's a tough challenge, because as a kid, a lot of people say, well, how do they know? Well, they do know. We have to stop watering children down and what they know and what they don't know. I mean, early on, they might not be able to articulate it. And that's why I asked the question, so that they could find the words to speak it for themselves. But I can tell you, I'll go back to Stephanie, from a very young age, all the kids, and at the time it was Stephanie, and she has a sister who's just about, 14, 15 months younger. And then Chrissy came along about 4 years later. And when the three of them were really little, Stephanie was the boss. And she would take everybody downstairs, and she would run this business, or this town called Tiny Town. Literally made up Tiny Town, and they had businesses, and people did certain things, and that's who she was. So you could see from just such a young age. At the same time, I was dropping her off, asking this question. She's running Tiny Town, and people say, oh, that's so cute, and she's got this business mind. Yes. And now as we sit here, she's 25 years old, working in New York City, working for a huge, massive corporation, running the business of their social media platform for one particular alley in the business. I'm not going to get into the details. It's her private stuff. But 25 years, well, not 25 years, but let's say she was probably about 7, 8. She was the same person then that she is today, and is very successful in doing what she wants to do. We're not talking money here, by the way, okay? Although she's very good at organizing that too, and probably has more in savings and investment than most people will have in a lifetime. Head scratcher. She's just that person. But you have to understand, she was given permission to be that person by us asking her, if you could do one thing the rest of your life, what would it be? Now, it evolved over time, and you could see the types of things that she was interested in. She certainly had an interest in business and fashion. She ended up going to a school that was more particularly oriented towards that, in a city where business proliferates, New York City. And so she went to school for this specialty. And that's where she learned her craft. Her resume when she came out of college was an arm's length long. I mean, working for the mayor of New York City, styling his wife in an internship. I mean, I could go on and on. I'm not here bragging about my child. I'm simply telling you the effect of asking a guiding question that provoked her to do this herself. And she did it herself. I mean, yes, we did some consultation. Yes, we did some homework with her. Yes, we would support her in those emotional moments, but this is just who she became more and more and more, because she didn't have to fake that she was these other things, that she wanted to go off to some liberal arts college and party and see the football games. Sure, there was an inkling to that, but it wasn't most important to her. That's our subject here. It wasn't most important. And so the ability to mature up and make a better school decision even was predicated on this whole concept of, well, what's most important to you? You're going to have a blast down there? Sure. You have some friends, but are you going to wake up every day and say, I made the best decision for me? Because you can have fun anywhere. So that's how that worked. Now, in getting into that, there's this concept of craft. By the way, I can go to my daughter, who's an actress, who's only 15 months younger than her. Very specific thing. But I'm telling you now, you're going to laugh at me when I tell you this, but I say this all the time. What was most important to her was acting. I mean, these two had Cinderella dress after Cinderella dress, crown, fake high heel shoes, and I am telling you, they were tiny little girls. Tiny. And it goes way back. Now, Jenny could cry crocodile tears on cue, is what I say, meaning I saw the actress in her from about 2 to 3 years old. 2 to 3 years old. You could see it. And so a lot of people might dismiss that, but I didn't. I leaned in and I looked at it and I kept asking her, if you could do one thing the rest of your life, what would it be? She probably would have told me cry at that point in time. But that was the point, is it was always the glamour. It was always the natural actress. Sure, everybody would love to say, oh, something exciting like that. Oh, my daughter's an actress. No, I mean it. This is what she is. And she kept giving herself more and more permission. And when she would get scared, because this is the other important part of what's most important to you, you will tend to fight through the pushback, the setbacks, the problems much more easily. And believe me when I tell you, she cries at 23 like she cried at 3. So the idea, though, is that she keeps going because it's important to her to win. Now, if it was something that she didn't love, it's easy to fall back. It's easy to get dejected. It's easy to be a terrible self-critic. Well, I'll never make it. I can't. Well, when it's important to you, you don't even talk like that after a while. You're like, oh my gosh, I can get the part or whatever, but I'm going to keep going the next day because it's all I want. It's the thing I want. So you start now beating on this craft over and over. So Stephanie, it was for business and fashion and design. And then it became this aesthetic with Instagram and social media. I mean, the kid wasn't there wasting time. She was building a career skill set that became massively important in business, and during the pandemic actually got a full-time job because she was beating on the craft and people could see it. People could see the slight distinctions, the style, the aesthetic, and it became valuable. And people that didn't know much about it looked to her and said, hey, we want you. I'm going to get to that, and when I wrap up here today, what that means. Jenny comes home and she continues in spite of the pandemic over the summer. She beats on this craft, and they go out and they do a pilot in the middle of Cape Cod, and people are wondering what they're doing, and she gets her friends and she pulls them together, and everybody that's artistic that has a role, the writer friend, the film friend, right? The overseer and fellow actor friend, and they make their own thing happen, and they don't care who thinks anything about them. They don't care what they think, who they think, nothing. It doesn't matter. They become engrossed in this craft and they beat on it, not getting paid a nickel, but just trying to express this thing, and they become lost in it. Now, of course, as a consultant, you're like, all right, are you grabbing the film of this thing and are you putting it up on your YouTube channel, your website? You can't just be all artistic and not directed, because I go back to this, you still need to survive. You still need to make this a viable way to make your living. And by the way, I do believe that whatever you love, you can probably hammer a living out of it if you really love it. But you have to really be all in. So by beating on that craft, you're making distinctions that you don't even realize are increasing your value to somebody. You're increasing your value, and it's fun. I know this as a coach because I've grown up in business, in the real estate coaching and agency business. And when we just stick with something and we're patient and we focus, no matter what everybody else is telling us we should be doing, we shouldn't be doing, we just beat on the details of that craft. And just the other day, what happens is all of a sudden, everybody's getting off a Zoom call and everybody's saying, that was the best call we have ever had. And sort of like, wow, what a reaction. Why? Because when you beat on that craft, what's happening is the synapses in the brain are firing, and new wirings are happening, and new distinctions are happening. And I'm getting the chills just saying it because I know what that feeling's like. But you're wiring things, and your brain is getting more excited. And so all the positive chemicals are beginning to flow more freely. And you're overcoming that depressed state of mind because you are stimulating the natural flow of these chemicals in your brain. And I'm no brain scientist, but I know what it feels like to have those moments of excitement, of connection, of distinction. That's what growth is. Growth of the mind and its understanding is so intoxicating. It is the best high you will ever get without touching anything external. You can do it through your belief system and stimulate this amazing system in your mind. Awesome. Powerful. So beating on that craft. And by the way, Will Smith, the actor, that's where I heard, there were a lot of people. I remember listening to a motivational tape and Jim Carrey was talking about intentionality, being intentional about this, not dabbling. I'm not talking about a hobby here. If you could have one hobby and you could do that on the side. Nope. I'm talking if you could do one thing and go all in with intentionality, as Jim Carrey said, followed up by Will Smith saying, and then just beating on your craft. See, a lot of people want to explain somebody's success away to talent. Well, I wasn't born that way. No. I do understand that there are some physical limitations, and I've said this before with sports or whatever it might be. I do understand it, but I've said before, it doesn't necessarily mean you have to be the center on the basketball team. You could be the coach, you could be the trainer, you could be the announcer. There are other things around this desire that you could play this incredible role. So get close to this thing that you love. And then figure out what your role really was meant to be, because you might start off perceiving I was supposed to be a player and then end up being the best coach they've ever seen, right? The best referee, the best ballet instructor, director, CEO, or technical engineer. We don't know, but if we start giving ourselves that permission, we end up moving in that direction. And as we beat on the craft, it'll reveal itself to you when you beat on it, because you might start off by saying, "Oh, I love software, but I'm going to be the CEO and I'm going to direct it." And then all of a sudden, you take a coding class and you're a junkie. Next thing you know, you're Python, C++, and all these other things, and you're an amazing coder, and people are seeking you out. It can happen like that, but you got to get close to the thing first. And then you got to fall in love with the craft and beat on it, make the distinctions, and be intentionally aware of the process that you're going through, because that's what's just so beautiful. And that's the last point here today, right? It's who we are becoming in this process. We're always looking for the end result, and too many of us are goofily looking for money. I will know I'm successful when I have gobs of money. No, you will not. You will not. You might have a lot of money. You might not have a lot of money, but you will feel differently about this process of becoming the thing that was important to you by beating on the craft that you so very much love and doing that one thing that consumes a big chunk of your life. And don't let anybody tell you, "Oh, you're a weirdo. You don't have any friends. Oh, you sit up there and all you do is play the violin." Yes, that's what you do, if that's what you want to do. Because ultimately, as we become this thing in a selfish, focused way, I'm going to get the chills just saying this one. Now, the lonely violinist in the basement gets invited to sit in the first chair, and the crowd pays to be entertained. And they cry, and they're moved, and they listen, and it's beautiful, and they fall in, and they wonder, how could she be so good? How? How can he play the game that well? How does she become? I didn't even know. How did she become that person? How did he write that code? Starting to get it? These are people that just simply gave themselves this kind of permission to live the life that was important to them, to beat on the craft that they so loved, so that ultimately, the craziest thing is, in that selfishness, they became incredibly valuable to the rest of us. Becoming people for others from the inside out. Instead of trying to pretend and, "Oh, I did this for them, and I'm in this club, and I'm in that club, and I do this," and we're kind of tacitly dabbling so everybody will tell us how great we are, instead of authentically becoming this thing with nobody's permission but our own. Yeah, baby. Get all jacked up on that. That's some good stuff right there. That, my friends, is good living. So let me go back over it, okay? It's a really, really deeply, as you can see, touching subject for me as a longtime coach with thousands of hours. Talk about tipping points. I've stumbled and tripped over more tipping and tripping points than you can imagine. I've seen this in people, and it's just awesome when you see it. But especially in my own 5 kids, I can see it as we just keep giving them permission to ask the question of themselves, what's most important to you? And then following the steps, reminding them There's nothing wrong with a selfish starting point. The next thing is asking, if you could do one thing in a selfish way the rest of your life, what would it be? Over and over. It's there, but you're just asking that question to bubble it up and give it life intentionally, said Jim Carrey. And then to fall in love with the beating on the craft. Once you know what it is, to beat on it, to become obsessed, to just fall in love. The greatest love in the world might be that thing that you are doing for yourself. To love yourself enough to do that thing and beat on that craft and go deep and make these crazy distinctions and get the natural chemicals in the brain pumping. And remembering it's who we're becoming that is the ultimate give back. But the irony and the twist at the end of this story is that we end up being of service to others to help them have that moment of awe and appreciation for who we became and ended up serving them when they so desperately or needed us, right? All right, let me summarize it this way. So many of us either believe or are taught to believe, worse, that we should be pleasing other people instead of asking ourselves what we must do to be truly happy in pursuit of what matters most to us. And if we do this simple thing, we actually end up serving others at our very peak capacity. All right, remember, you can take immediate action to get moving in a better direction for your life, I hope, because we take all the notes from each episode and we post them briefly, a couple episodes at a time at freethinkingtools.com, freethinkingtools.com. Why only a couple? Because I don't want to confuse you. And you'll do nothing if I put them all up there. So if I put a couple episodes in notes, you can take them out to have a cup of coffee. Well, these days in the pandemic, it might be in the comfort of your own home, but print them out. Sit down and think. Think your way to a better life. That's what I want for you. Also, don't forget to subscribe to the podcast on iTunes, Spotify, or wherever you listen so that you don't miss out on any insights each time we upload the episodes. We also post all of our episodes on our social media channels, so remember to turn on notifications for the bonus section, and you won't miss the reminders. We'd also appreciate it if you would share our content. Please do that with other people that are like you so that they get some help that they need, and you can join our mission of ultimately becoming people for others. But remember how I want you to do that. I want you to be authentically you. All right? Thank you for listening. But remember what I always say when I sign off. Nobody's coming for you. So go get to work on yourself and your own life. And I will see you in the next episode.